Thanks, Matthias. I'm delighted to be here with you, delighted to see the traction that Holacracy is getting worldwide. If you read my introduction to Brian's book, you know that in the very beginning I said this is a 5-year research project, which I basically wanted to prove wrong as fast as I could, because if it really worked, I didn't want to wait 1 second to implement it. So I tried as fast as I could to find out if it wouldn't work. I'm still trying, 7 years later, 6 years later, and haven't found a hole in it yet. I'm going to talk for a few minutes just about sort of what the methodology is that I came up with, how it compares and perhaps feathers with the Holacracy practice itself, and cabbages and kings and whatever else shows up. And Brian and I always kind of bullshit together, and so we'll do that as well. And we'll also open for questions. Happy to field that and engage with you. Kuhn, are you in here? Kuhn invited me to, yeah, there we go. I spent an hour with the senior team that he's working with here in Amsterdam, the day before yesterday, I guess. Some of the questions, and here's some of the questions people often have. Well, first of all, let me find out something. It will help me get a sense of 3 categories. You've either never heard of Getting Things Done or GTD or me, or you've heard of it, but you haven't implemented any of it. That's one category. Second category would be, yeah, you've heard of it and you started to implement some things. So you're sort of partially a GTDer. And the third category would be, you could walk on water, but you don't need to because, you don't need to prove anything. You're so good. That is, that you have actually integrated a majority of the Getting Things Done methodologies and they're habitual to you. So there's those 3 categories. Who's in category 1? This is kind of new to you, don't know much about it, or haven't implemented much about it. Thanks. Okay, and who's in category 2? You know about it, you're kind of sort of there to some degree. Okay, who's in category 3? Okay, cool. Well, that gives me a sense of this. So I'm going to talk to the people who have never heard of this, because those of you who think you're really good, there's a lot to still learn. I'm still learning. This is a lifelong lifestyle art and craft. How do you manage the flow of life's work? And that means all the things that would encompass both personal and professional world, and work being so broad, called anything you want to get done that's not done yet. If you want to go to a party to have fun, that's work. That's something to do that's not done yet. By the way, if you go to a party to have fun and you don't have fun, that's an unproductive party. Because productivity has got such baggage around it because it has, most people tie it to the corporate work harder kind of world. Productivity simply means achieving a desired result. So if you go on a vacation to relax and don't relax, that's an unproductive vacation. So, outcome thinking is a lot of what this is about. The crossover between the 2 things in a very simplistic way, and there's a lot of subtlety that will kind of push back on what I'm about to say. In a simplistic way, Holacracy will be about optimizing the functionality of an organization. Getting Things Done is about optimizing the functionality of you as an individual. Now, if you have suboptimally functioning individuals, how easy is it to implement Holacracy? Well, you can implement Holacracy, but you're going to have to really, really structure it and follow people around and hold their hands like crazy, and it's going to be highly frustrating if they are not managing themselves elegantly. You're going to have so many projects in your tactical meeting on the board to try to get people who are not accountable for managing themselves and their own projects that they have, that you're going to use peer pressure from the team to try to get them to do it. That sucks. So I'll tell on Brian, because I know I've heard him say this before. I don't know if this is still true, Brian, but Brian said if you had to choose between getting Holacracy first or getting things done first, getting things done first wins. For years, people have often asked, David, how does getting things done affect an organization? Well, getting things done, I've sort of pushed up against that for years. That's one of the reasons I instantly saw Holacracy and said, this is organizational mind like water. Brian and Tom and folks have done an incredibly brilliant job of really unpacking the complexities of what has to happen to understand the relationships between ourselves and our agreements with each other. That's a huge arena. I mean, I could have a clear head, managing GTD myself. You could have a clear head, right? And now two clear heads come together. Exponentially, the complexity of potential confusion and lack of clarity just happened. Add a few more people and imagine that. Oh my God. Now, let me step back a minute and say complexity. Just managing yourself. Most people have no clue how many agreements they've made with themselves. None. No clue. Oh, I should. I need to. I ought to. I need to. I could. Would. Should. Oh. I know I've spent thousands of hours over the last 35 years, literally thousands of hours, one-on-one with some of the best, brightest, and busiest people on the planet implementing this methodology. And I can tell you, very few people on the planet have a clue how much confusion they actually have, simply because they haven't kept track of all their agreements with themselves. And they're not really managing it appropriately. Here's a big secret, too. Getting things done is not about getting things done. It's about being so appropriately engaged with all the aspects of your life, you're totally present with whatever you're doing. That's the optimal state to function from. It's the optimal state to hit a golf ball from, optimal state to cook spaghetti from, optimal state to fire somebody from, optimal state to be present with your kids and tuck them into bed. The most productive place to operate from is when you are clear. But how much does that take just for an individual to get clear? By the way, once you handle what has your attention, then you'll find out what really has your attention. Which, by the way, once you then get appropriately engaged with, will allow you the freedom to start to see what really has your attention. Which, by the way, will then open up the field to let you see what really has your attention, till you really get clear about why you're on the planet. So this is a lifelong way to begin to understand that. And just even though we talk about an individual, how complex are you? How many of you have a committee in your head? If you could just get your committee to shut up or get it into consensus, you probably wouldn't be in any stress. Any of you ever had your committee members throwing plates at each other inside your head? How many circles do you have psychically? Well, there's the GCC. Okay. And then there's the physical body circle, and then there's the recreation circle, and then there's the relationship circle, and then there's my dog circle, and then there's health and vitality, and then there's recreation, and then there's the sub-circles called guilty sins and good movies, and oh my God. Just getting your act together is a lifelong process. So can imagine now adding people then coming together. Now, see, you folks talk about whether it's an appropriate thing to deal with if it's in somebody's personal space, if they just have a personal preference on it. Well, GTD doesn't make that distinction. GTD dealing with the individual. So you got a preference? Great. What's your outcome? What's your next action? What are you going to do to get appropriately engaged with that thing that's bothering you or sparking you or whatever that thing is? So this still, GTD is more about the individual psyche or the individual space. However, what happens when one person up-levels themselves in terms of how well they manage themselves? What happens in their organization? Well, first of all, it up-levels every single intersection they have. If you get GTD, every one of your intersections is going to be have a lot more integrity. Even if the person you're intersecting with is out of control, you're keeping track of your stuff, you're keeping track of their stuff that you care about. And they're going to want to get their act together when they show up with you. Otherwise, they're going to feel kind of silly. So just one person starting to manage themselves with elegance affects everybody that they intersect with. So when two or more start to do this, boy, that could be really cool. So we've seen whole cultures change simply by introducing and starting to become habitual with the lexicon of getting things done. What are we trying to accomplish? What's the next step? And who's got it? Outcome and action are the zeros and ones of productivity, by the way. What are we trying to accomplish? How do we allocate resources or attention, or reallocate them to make it happen? Same is true with Holacracy. Again, it's just applied in an organizational context to then make sure you understand how to then manage those agreements and those relationships. So, so what? So that's in a sense what the intersection is. Quite practically speaking, if you've got people that don't know what a next action is, if they think do budget is a next action, you got a problem, because they've got a problem, because they're going to walk out of there procrastinating about that like crazy. The main reason people procrastinate is because they don't know what to do. Wouldn't take them long to figure it out, but they haven't held themselves down to have to think and make that decision. Thinking is tough, folks. It takes energy to think. It really does. And thinking is required to define your work. The late, great Peter Drucker would tell everybody in this room, your biggest job is defining your work. Well, I did that on a personal level. Brian and Tom and folks have done that on an organizational level. How do we define the work? Because it's not self-evident. The old days, prior to knowledge work was somewhat self-evident. Your job was making and moving things. You show up in a big pile of unmade, unmoved things, make it real clear how to spend your day. There's no lack of clarity. There's no confusion about it. You can be more efficient with how well you make and move them, and that was the old Taylor and that was the old productivity game, was just being more efficient with the work that was clear to be done. But knowledge work added a whole new thing. You have to think to figure out how to respond to an email. You have to decide, is that trash? Is that reference material that I need to have access to? Is that something I might want to move on, but not now, but later on? And if it's something I am committed to move on, what's the very next action I would need to take to move the needle on this? And if that one action won't complete it, what's the project that I'm committed to finish? I just gave you the formula for how you get appropriately engaged. It's that simple. And yet that is a formula that you're not born doing. Any of you hop out of your mother and go, "Hi, Mom, what are you trying to accomplish? And what's the next action? Is that yours or mine?" No, that is a learned behavior. Not only that, it doesn't show up naturally. It'll show up naturally in one instance, crisis. Most people relax in a crisis. Why? It takes away all the decisions you need to make. The real crisis happens when you're not in one. Why? Now all the demons come rushing through the gates. Oh my God, I could do this and I could do that, and there's this thing I need to do and this thing I need to do. Oh my God, I got plates spinning in the air. Ah! That's the real crisis. And that's why people are turning to toast and burning out and feeling overwhelmed. It's the stress of opportunity. There are so many things you could be doing. Anyway, so if you're not familiar, those of you who are not familiar with the Getting Things Done methodology, the basics of it basically are to capture the things that have your attention. In GTD, we use the word attention. You use the word tension in Holacracy. Same thing. What's not on cruise control? See, a lot of you have strategic, important things in your life that are not on your mind right now. Why? Some part of you says those are on cruise control. But how many of you have had your mind go somewhere while you've been sitting in here today that had nothing to do with what was going on in here today? Come on, raise your hand. Now, if where your mind went was doing creative thinking, down track your brain had never been before, that was actually adding value to what you were thinking about, I'd go, dude, stay there. That's a cool place for your mind to go. That's not where most of you went when you left. Where'd you go? You went to something that you are not yet appropriately engaged with. Something is yanking your chain, ringing your bell. Pay attention. And there's some decision about that situation that you have not made, or you have not parked the results of that decision making in some trusted system that you know you'll see or the right person will see at the right time. That's why stuff is on your mind 98% of the time. So you don't have to go very far to see how to start to implement this algorithm about how do you get clarity and get appropriately engaged. Just start to pay attention to what's got your attention. First step is to capture those things. So if I was going to coach you, or one of our coaches was going to coach you, we just sit down with you and say, hey, let's get everything out of your head and in your life that is incomplete, that's got your attention, that's somehow pulling on you, personal, professional, little or big. That'll take us 1 to 6 hours. Not to prioritize it, not to organize it, but just to name it. Oh, I need cat food. We write that down. I got to get in touch with Bill Smith. We write that. My printer just broke. Let me write that down. I need a dog. I need a life. Let me write that down. We get it all. Just that's can be a transformative experience, by the way. Very few people have ever really, really, really done that. Just unload. Big data dump. Mind sweep, we call it. Then what you do with that, by the way, if you just stop there, then you're likely to become a compulsive list maker, which is not going to help either. Then you got lists and post-its stuck all over God and creation, and that's not going to help either. You need to, once you dump the stuff out, you need to empty what you dumped it in. You don't empty it by finishing those things, you empty it by getting clarity about, is that something to move on, yes or no? If no, you trash it, reference it, incubate it. If it is something to move on, what's the next action? And what's the project, if there is one, about this I'm committed to? That adds clarity to that email, to those meeting notes, to all that stuff you guys are going to leave here with. You guys are writing stuff down, fabulous. You're capturing things, but some of that you're going to have to decide that's reference. Some of that you don't need anymore. Some of that you're going to need to take an action about based upon whatever you told yourself. But that is not clear yet. It shouldn't be. In this kind of situation, I'm just gathering stuff. I don't know. That's kind of a maybe good idea. I'll find out later on. And the later on is important. Then you need to sit down and get this conference off your mind as quick as you can. The way you do that is appropriately engaging with whatever happened here, whatever commitments you had, whatever inputs that you got here. That's how you manage that stuff. Anyway, so that's capture, clarify, then organize the results. If you came up with, oh, you know, I need to surf the web about this thing that I heard about. Great. What's the next step? Surf web. Great. Where are you going to be reminded of that if you're not surfing the web that very second? That's organized. Put parking reminders of things you need to be reminded of in terms of what your work is, what your commitments are, what you need to do about it. Getting stuff done is about understanding what does done mean and what does doing look like. The interesting thing and why people often resist this process on the front end, unless they're in a crisis, is because those actually require two different parts of your brain. Challenging. Vision, execution. Those are actually two different parts of the brain. So this actually is a martial art. It's somebody very appropriately labeled GTD, knowledge work athletics. It's actually a cognitive muscle that you need to train. Wait a minute, what's the outcome I'm committed to? That's the vision thinking, but wait a minute, what's the execution piece? And then that's uses another part. Anyway, so there's, I guess before Brian comes up, I'll just say, I think I've mentioned already a little bit, the reason I took to this so rapidly and immediately, relatively speaking, I know Tom kept banging on our head, saying, come on, David, you guys need to start. And going, I don't know if we're really ready to start. I don't know if we're really ready to start. There's never a good time to start Holacracy. I hope you folks realize that. You're never going to be ready. There is no ready for Holacracy. Right? Holacracy is what makes you ready for other things, but anyway, it took us about 3 or 4 months after Brian and I shared a stage. I heard him talk. I went, oh my God, that's what I was looking for. Because I had just fired not long before that a CEO that really screwed up the company. It did not work very well at all. And I was licking my wounds and it was expensive. I said, and I'm not the best person to be a CEO. But God, is there some way I can get this organization to run itself so I don't have to bring somebody in like that again? And then I heard Brian talk and I went, oh my God, that's it. That's what I needed. And also, because I was about to fold a company. We were about 40, 45 people maybe at that time. I don't remember, something like that. And because I just couldn't take the stress, of that responsibility. At the same time, I was trying to write another book and doing, things I do better than trying to run a company. And so that's why we jumped in full bore. And, we're still working it. This is Holacracy is not something to go beyond. It is beyond. It's just like GTD. You don't get past managing the flow of life's work. You also don't get past organizationally managing the flow of organizational work. And if you got a better model than Holacracy to take it next, it will be Holacracy. That's why if you can find a way to get your head as empty as you can with as little effort as possible as I have and find better than mine, I'll teach it in the next seminar. I'm not proud. I'm just looking for the easiest way to get from here to there. That's my game. Anyway, so hopefully that was, I don't know what that was, but I enjoyed it. So.
hopefully continue to enjoy that, the two of you. Brian, welcome on stage.
So they tell me we've got basically just 10 minutes to talk about anything we want.
Oh, good.
So what's the weather like in Amsterdam? Is that interesting? Oh, okay. Just listening to you, just a reflection to start us off. Something jumped out at me. One of the things I think GTD and Holacracy has in common, and there's a lot, when you first encounter it, if you look at it from kind of an arm's length perspective, looks like GTD is about making lists and the actions and projects, kind of boring structural stuff. And you look at Holacracy, arm's length at first. There's these roles and accountabilities and meetings, and it just kind of all looks like mechanics. And the same is true of both. But when you really understand what the practice is about, it's for me. I often say, and people think I'm joking, but I'm really not. GTD is my spiritual practice, right? It's how I engage with my attention. For me, I credit it with a lot of my own development as an adult, as a human in the world, because of the way of working with human consciousness, which is really what that's about. It's being aware of what pops into your mind and then appropriately engaging with that consciousness, right? And knowing how to channel that consciousness into some kind of change or impact in the world, right? It's harnessing consciousness for a result, which is, I think, the same thing that Holacracy is doing as well in a collective setting. It is about consciousness. Tensions are things we sense because we're conscious beings. And then we have to clarify what the tension means. So there's this really interesting, deep spiritual work, whatever you want to call it. If that word doesn't resonate, choose another. But it's really deep consciousness work.
Well, the reason that those two things are so similar is because over the last few years, I've really realized that the end result of GTD, it's appropriate engagement, but the reason for appropriate engagement is clarity, is clear head. So you don't need time, you need room. It doesn't take any time to have a good idea or be creative or be present. Those don't require time. They do require room. If you're taking emotionally or psychologically one meeting into the next, or home to work, or work to home in your mind, that is not mind like water. That's not clarity. You will then be suboptimal in terms of your ability to be focused and put your attention anywhere. So clarity, and I've heard you say this many times, that Holacracy is really about clarity. It's about making sure people are clear with that, because in clear space makes it easy to deal with surprise. If you're not in clear space, you will over or underreact to things you don't expect. Whereas when you're in clear space, then it's like, hey, bring it on. There's just next input. There's no overwhelm. That's why when I'm not doing anything else, I'm cleaning up backlog to zero, emails and everything else. Why? Because there's a surprise coming toward me. And when that hits, I want as little backlog of unprocessed, unclarified stuff so that I have the freedom to make a judgment call spontaneously in the moment. And that what we have discovered. I think you talked about growth in Holacracy. We're shrinking our company from 50 down to 6. And we've been using Holacracy to shrink, not grow. Interestingly, we're shrinking so that we're actually partnering with the world. So we're actually expanding by how we're shrinking and our ability to do that much better. But we've been constantly changing, constantly getting clarity, and you're going to fall out of clarity whenever any new thing shows up. That's the nature of it. The nature of a new goal, a surprise. A company decides they want to buy you. So, any of the changes that you guys are dealing with organizationally, when those things show up, you want as much clarity as possible, and it will then make you unclear by its very nature, but then you don't want to stay unclear. You need to have the tools to then get back to clarity, and that's what Holacracy provides, what GTD provides.
In fact, that was much of the impulse for developing Holacracy in the first place. It was, for me, when I first got a hold of GTD and implemented it almost all at the same time. I started the book, and I did nothing but read that book and implement. At that point, it just grabbed me so much. And I tasted clarity, and it was a high. It was better than any drug you can buy down here in Amsterdam. It was this mind-expanding sense of, I'm clear. When I had finished implementing this process, my head is clear, and I'm completely present. I felt more conscious, more awake than I've ever felt in my life. Right? And that left me hungry, because as soon as I went and talked to somebody else in my company, that clarity disappeared. Now I'm like, okay, right back to somebody else is chasing the latest and loudest thing to grab their attention instead of consciously, presently engaging. And and then I'm doing it too because I don't know how to respond and deal with their work as well. And then suddenly I get to the point where we all have good practices and still the organization's a mess. And I was just hungry for how do I get that feeling of clarity, of space, of I feel no impulse to over or under react. That's a great measurement I use myself. When attention shows up, right, do I just engage with, do I write it down and let it go? Because I know it's written down and I'm going to get to process it, and that's going to change things in my organization. Right? When I feel that peace of there, I haven't underreacted or overreacted. I've reacted appropriately. It's on cruise control again, autopilot or whatever. That's really cool, and that is a lot of where I think Holacracy came from. Was that almost hungered. I had to have that clarity in the organizational realm. It was too compelling in the personal realm. You know? So it's fascinating to see how much of all of the two methods, or of all the methods I've seen, all the processes, there's nothing I've found yet that is anywhere near to the core of what Holacracy is about to me as GTD, because it's a process for the same thing, and it's really deep work.
Certainly can be.
Good note to switch to some Q&A.
Yeah, I think we'd like to use the opportunity.
Yeah, cool.
The two of you on stage.
I'll stay.
For more clarity,
Cool.
and ask questions to Brian and David. So is there a question you'd like to direct to one?
You used the term mind like water. I remember reading it in your book. Can you
Can I
talk a
describe
bit more
mind
about
like water? I used that from the martial arts. I got a black belt in karate before many of you were born, way back then. But I had the experience of that. And you know, Bruce Lee's sensei, I think, was the guy that popularized he popularized that. The mind like water. Water looks weak and fluid, but it's one of the most powerful forces in the world. And the idea is water totally appropriately engages with its environment. It could be still, it could be rushing, it could be, you know, whatever, but it's not confused about how to engage with the world. And, you know, it's ready, you know, you throw a pebble in it, it does pebbleness. You know, you throw a boulder in it, it does boulderness. You know, and it's also not going, oh God, here comes a boulder. It just goes boulder, yeah, right. You know, so it's it's one of those things that is just is, and it's flexible, and it has the ability to do that. So, but if you're taking one meeting into the next psychologically, or home to work, or work to home, that's not mind like water. So the whole idea is to be as open as you can. And they were very real. I mean, one of the reasons I got into GTD to begin with many, many years ago was I had discovered the deliciousness of clear space, both from spiritual and meditative practices, but also in the martial arts. The martial arts are very real. They're very real practices to clear your head. You know, but trust me, you know, like focus on your breathing. I mean, the mindfulness folks know that now, but I learned that in 1968 when I was first starting to train in karate, right? If you get kicked in the balls, I guarantee you better focus on your breath. No, because pain comes from the ego, because it allows you go in the past called, oh, damn, that happened, and you're afraid it's going to continue. So when you're totally present, it's just sensation. That's what the yogis know, you know, in terms of that, they do all that kind of stuff. But they're very real exercises that you know, and if 4 people jump you in a dark alley, folks, you don't want to have 2,000 unprocessed emails hanging in your psyche. You know, you need to be clear, and then yo, clear, yo, no residue, yo, let's go have a beer. Man, mind like beer or
like
water,
mindfulness?
whatever. Did that help?
It's like mindfulness. It's similar. So Achtsamkeit in German, the mindfulness, it's the same spirit of thinking.
Well, mindfulness is just learning to manage your attention. You know, and a lot of that is about, yes, you can exercise the discipline to, oh, I need cat food, wait a minute. I don't want the need for cat food to bother my attention right now. So you train yourself to not have, I need cat food popping into your mind. Well, great. Why don't you just go handle cat food? Jesus. You know, it's like, sure, I'm too lazy to do all that work trying to manage my attention. Why don't I do the stuff that caused it to have attention to begin with, and then make sure that's clear? There are a lot better places to go in my mind than just trying to train to not think about cat food. But, you know, the truth is, I mean, having clarity, I mean, you can shut your mind up either by drinking or meditating. You know, one numbs it, the other leaves it, right? But while you're in it, if you want clarity, you're going to have to do these practices that appropriately engage with it. See, if I need cat food pops into your head twice, you are inappropriately engaged with your cat. Really, why would it pop in twice? Because you didn't deal with it the first time. Doesn't mean you have to go get cat food. Just means you need to stick it on the post-it on the fridge so whoever's going to the store says, oh, we need cat food, and done. That's off your mind. Clear head. Anyway, nothing wrong with training your attention. I'm just too lazy to do a lot of that stuff.
Further questions you'd like to direct to David? Right? At this point? Yeah.
I hope you can both help it from the I perspective and the organizational perspective. One of the things I really fell in love, and we fell in love at Business School Lausanne when we started Holacracy, is this idea of having the purpose as our new boss. That's the way we have interpreted Holacracy and embraced it. And I'm having a personal hard time since yesterday because I see there's a lot of energy in finding better way to be productive and respond to customers and to market. And I've heard not enough for myself about how this can help alignment with purpose. Can you bring me back to sanity and tell me again how GDD and Holacracy are powerful tools to align a personal life and an organizational life to purpose? Thank you.
Can I take a first stab at this one? So think about your stereotypical management hierarchy, big company, whatever. Probably not very purpose-oriented, purpose-driven, but look at what gets in the way of that, right? I doubt it would do much good if the CEO said, well, let's get really clear on our purpose. Right? The stuff that gets in the way of that is rarely lack of clarity of purpose. They might have that too, but it's all of the tensions, all of the politics. Your customers are calling, they're angry, you've got a billion emails coming in at you, you've got all this stuff to do, and you can't get what you need from another department, and that's the stuff that gets in the way of purpose. For me, purpose is it's so much more effective if you want to have a purposeful life or a purposeful organization to not just make your focus about let's get more purposeful. Let's just get all the stuff out of the way. Purpose will naturally show up, right? There's an impulse there, and when you are clear and you are present, that impulse speaks, right? So for me, the best thing I've found to get more purposeful organizations is to get all of the tensions out of the way, get all of the other stuff clear. And as David said, you'll then get more tensions, right? You'll get something else, but it's bigger, it's broader, it's more interesting. You get that stuff all out of the way, and then you get something else. Right? What you're doing there with clearing that space is allowing purpose to work through you or through your organization. Right? And to me, that's the same thing I find with GTD. I feel like my life is incredibly purposeful, but it's not because I had a big summit to figure out my purpose and then top down tried to figure out how to align my life with that. Actually worked out very differently. It was just getting clear, engaging with my consciousness, my attention, constantly noticing it and clearing it out, clearing space, and then something more interesting shows up and more interesting until I have space to really get more clear. My purpose finds me, Anyway, Ed?
Yeah, I totally agree. Purpose is, why do you have a living room? Most people don't even live in their living room. Why do you have a dog? Why are you here? The why question is really a fabulous question to be asking all the time. And the answers don't necessarily always naturally show up. They will to some degree, as Brian said, with all the work I've done with just some of the best people on the planet, as they get clearer about the things that are not clear for them now, they automatically lift up like a helium balloon and then see things from a higher altitude and a higher perspective. Almost naturally, that does start to happen. They can still put more cognitive energy on getting clearer about what those feelings are or what those pressures are or what those pulls are toward them. But as I said, handle what has your attention, then you'll find out what really has your attention, which will then allow you to find out what really has your attention. And if what has your attention is your purpose, great, that's where you start. See, what GTD is kind of cool, and Holacracy in the same way, is we start not with where you should be, but with where you are. Like, that's a huge difference. See, if you try to go with where you're not yet, and your day-to-day is out of control, you're just going to add guilt and frustration to your life. And if your day-to-day is out of control, setting a vision is going to blow your fuses. More shit to do. Oh my God. right? And so handling what, and invariably for years I've had people do a mind sweep, and they write down, oh, what's got your attention? And they're like, usually I say, okay, guys, how many of you in the first 20 things you wrote down fulfilled destiny as human spirit on the planet? Everybody goes, oh, no. What do they write down? Babysitter, cat food, vice president, budget, bank. Yeah, that's right. But by the way, interestingly enough, if you unpack why do you want a cat? And then ask the 5 whys. Why do you think you want to have an animal around? Oh, because you think it's going to open your heart and give you a communication device to be able to communicate more elegantly with people instead of just face to face and eye to eye. Great, why that? Oh, because I love to connect with human beings and in a heartfelt relationships. Great, why that? Because that's who I am. Now you've got purpose, but it's actually embedded in everything you're currently doing if you were just conscious. So getting you conscious and in control of everything. I wrote an essay once, I think it's in my second book, called The Magic of the Mundane. The mundane, when you handle the mundane, is going to open up all kinds of doors that would never open if you tried to start at the top. How much is knowing your life purpose going to help you decide which email to write first tonight? A little bit. And we uncovered in GTD there are 6 horizons. Couldn't get it any simpler. There's purpose and principles. Those are the prime drivers, what really, really matters to you. But then you need the vision of fulfilling that purpose successfully, which is the vision level. And then you're going to need some things you're committing to do to make the vision happen, which is the project, the goals and objectives level. And then you have to manage all the stuff you need to manage: relationships, quality, finances, health, and so forth. That's a level of maintenance that you need to make sure is there so that you've got balance and health in the enterprise to be able to even go where you need to go. And then you have 30 to 100 projects about all those moving parts, about which you've got about 150 to 220 next actions right now. How are you folks doing? Anybody show me that inventory of every one of those things, that it's totally current and complete right now? And if you can't, there's a part of you wondering if here's where you really need to be. Once you look at all that, you go, yo, this is where I need to be. That then allows you to do it. But you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what you're not doing. So there's these multiple levels of getting clear with yourself about what is your agreement with yourself. What is your agreement with yourself about why you're on the planet? Which is the purpose, thing, at least for you personally. Same would be true of organization. Why do we exist? So those are great questions. Couldn't push back on that at all. And that will create tension that you will then at some point be able to recognize and then have an appropriate way to start to engage with that. If you can't come up with a next action on what your life purpose is, don't even bother. Right?
Thank you, Carl. Would there be a better, more beautiful question to end the day with than the purpose we have in the organization? Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, David, for this inspiring conversation we had. Maybe we would say goodbye with a great round of applause for the two of them.